when we talked about, this was the subject that was written on the leaflet, you know, animals in viticulture, okay? And so let's look at animals in viticulture. I particularly work with heavy horses. I work the land with horses, vineyards, vegetable gardening, and forestry. Now, there are many reasons, and I'll give you an example. We hosted the European Federation for Animal Traction, their annual general meeting, some 4 years ago. And what would we discuss? We would discuss ground compaction, for example. You know, the big argument for working horses, and it's a valid argument, ground compaction. But I'm a biodynamic farmer. The argument doesn't stop there. There's something else going on. There are other things moving, for which, as a biodynamic farmer, these are the things that I should be looking for. And it was difficult. I asked somebody to come and speak with a biodynamic approach about this, because I was developing, if you like, the material approach, ground compaction and all this kind of thing. But let's consider the fact that our work is to give life to the earth. And we do so, humus, cover crops for the nitrogen that they give us in the ground, and so on. And then we go over the ground with heavy equipment. And this is a nightmare. How do I develop a living ground, and then crush it all the time? And then develop living ground, crush it, back and forward. It's a nightmare. So the argument for working horses is a really strong one, as far as the material is concerned. And for us farmers, we're trying to develop a living soil, and we crush them with tractors all the time, especially us, those of us who make wine, because we must do sulfur and Verderama copper treatments and so on, depending on the season. And so we pass with this heavy equipment to spray on our vineyards, and we're creating walls that you can measure 30 years afterwards. There was, I'm glad to say, in Germany they do a lot of experiments. One really nice experiment, in a way, was that up to 70 hectares, working horses was more economical. I really like that as an experiment. It was really good news. But let's think about the material side of things for the moment, and how difficult it is for us to develop a living soil because we use heavy equipment. Now in Germany they did an experiment, They tried something out. And they found that this is 2 tracks, of a tractor and the idea of a wall. That having passed once with a tractor, they were able to see the damage, if you like, done 30 years afterwards. Because what happens is that when you develop this wall that is under the tyre, let's do a tyre like this, water and microorganisms cannot dissolve that. That wall remains. Okay, so we're actually creating a wall where life cannot pass through. But they found at the same time that where a horse puts its hoof as such, this column would disintegrate after a while through water and through microorganisms. So the argument in that respect was very valid. So we have the fact that up to 70 hectares, it's economically viable, more viable than heavy equipment. But on the other hand, with compaction, because we are talking of an animal that's 800 kilos in general, so that's quite a lot of weight anyway on a small area. But that it was dissoluble through water and the work of microorganisms. so there was no long-term effect. Now this is very much a scientific, material scientific approach and response to the use of working animals. We've already looked though at the cycles that the animals create. And I must say that when I first brought horses on the land 8 years ago, it took a year, and then all sorts of life returned. You know, insects and flies, especially flies, but insects and birds and worms and everything, everybody, you know, the drivers and the bakers, they started to return to the land. And it is my experience that while I'm working with a horse and they leave their manure, to me this is, I call it biodynamic gold. No, it really is, because it is a font of life. Every time they poo while we work, I leave a font of life, and life is created by this, no? But it also helps me with cow horn manure. I do cow horn manure with cow manure and horse manure, and experiment the, if you like, the different results, but also mix the manure with cow manure, with preparations, so that I can give the land good compost, so that the land can digest and work. I was going somewhere here, yes. So we have the natural scientific approach. What is the biodynamic approach? Apart from the results of manure and what we can do with it, what about the elements? Water, earth forces, light, air, and heat forces. What's going on there? Now, when I'm not a good cook, but if I cook, I'm interested in what I'm doing. I focus, I know where the things come from. Then somebody beside me, maybe they're a good cook, but they're not interested in where the things come from. They're not focused, they just throw it together. They know how to cook. No? But when you taste my plate and the plate of the next person, you can tell which person was interested and cured the making of that food with attention, and let's use the word love in a very light way, yeah? With feelings. No? But you can taste the difference. If we were to harvest with a machine, or we were to harvest by hand, there's a difference. If in the cantina, how we work, how we are involved with our winemaking, there's a difference. Because in us lives the capacity, as does the element, as we know of, the heat element. The heat element, which is at the basis of the formation of the fruit and the seed, the power of creation as such, and that which maintains that which it creates, lives in us. And we transfer this to our work if we are involved. And so the power to create life and to sustain life is something that comes outside of us when we work with our land, with our products and so on. And so the question of working animals then assumes a different perspective. What forces am I bringing into the natural world and in my vineyards? Let's stay with vineyards. What are the forces that I bring into the vineyards when I work my horses in the vineyards? It's the same as such, that I should cultivate my vineyards with interest, that I should know my plants, that I should harvest with my hands in a feeling way, that I should develop what goes on with, let's call it the winemaking side, in a feeling way. We all admire winemakers who have a passion for what they do in the cantina, no? And we have this feeling that good wines come from these people who are dedicated and passionate about their winemaking. No? Why? Because of the force, the creative forces that they give to the products that they're dealing with. The same thing is when you bring your animals, but in our case, the horses. No? I bring into the vineyards forces that create life and that sustain life. So you can imagine that as a winemaker, a grape grower at this stage, that my interest in the land, my passion for the land, my interest and my passion for the vines, and how I collect the vines, and how I press or maturate, however I deal with the vinification process, that my animals are working with me, and they're giving to the vines the same power of growth and birth, if you like, creation. No? This is the real content of working animals. This is what they really do. And again, we go towards the astrality, the life forces, the forces that work in nature. This is the point. No, this is the point. The life forces, the etheric forces, the astral forces that we bring to our cultivation. This is the point of working animals. Although it's fair enough, ground compaction and these things come into it, because for us it's a nightmare to develop good soil when we have to go over them with heavy equipment. It really is a nightmare. But the one question I had for myself when I started farming, because I'm a Londoner, all right, I'm not a farmer born, okay, which was an advantage, because I came into farming with open eyes and, if you like, less tradition and more questions. I had no blinds. I saw what was in front of me. And I do ask the question, how is it with our philosophy and our understanding of life that we don't have working horses on our farms? This to me remains something of an enigma. Ground compaction, life forces, all sorts of stuff go on, but also the response of our relationship to the animal world. Here also, I have very many questions that are not resolved. I don't understand why in the biodynamic viticultural world we are not all trying at least to develop working horses on our land, which is part of our philosophy. No? And so this is a question I have, no, for you in a certain respect, and I'm sure there are many good answers, but it still remains a question for me. There's too much to gain from having working horses. Now, 8 years ago when I came to the farm, I was a carpenter, and I saw the situation of the farm, which was not okay for me, because I was also for many years a student of Steiner before I started farming. And so I asked them, the group as such, do you really want to do biodynamics or organics? And everyone said, no, we want to do biodynamics, you know? And they didn't know what they were saying, really, you know? And so from that day onwards, you know, okay, you want to do biodynamics? Well, let's get on with it then. And we're still trying today, 8 years after. It's not easy for any of us. And so the question of working horses is not only an issue of forces, a complete organism, compaction, life, and whatever, but it's also an economic question, which is the difficult issue for us. Because if we could afford it, we'd build a stable, we'd get horses, we would get equipment, and we would pay somebody to work our land with the horses. We wouldn't wait. And I think that's the problem now. It's more economic and what it takes from us. But my argument 8 years ago was that if we spend 25 to 50,000 euros over the next couple of years to develop working horses on the land, it will be worth €1 million of publicity and promotion in the next 5 years. And it was exactly that way. I got €1 million of publicity and promotion now for what, let's just say, cost me 25, 50,000 euros. It paid me back many times, and it continues to do so. All of us in our work have to develop today not just a good product, but a very powerful image. And we could say that the 8th sea of the world is the Sea of Wine. And so we have to develop an image that you can see from the coast all around. No? And a horse's head with a collar, everyone can see in the middle of the ocean. And it's something they won't forget. And so as an image, it's very powerful if you want to, and we must develop our image in the market today. Other contents of promotion were important in the past, but today we have to develop an image for our farm. And so it's invaluable. They pay us back many times. No? But they also resolve the compaction issue. They also resolve the organism issue. They also resolve, in a way, because it's easy to love a horse, no? The relationship that we must develop with animals. They resolve so many things. No? And so I hope, in effect, that what I'm saying will stimulate interest because they give back so much. It is a commitment. You must give more, but what you get back is many times more than you give. So there's a little argument for working horses. I managed to get that in. But it's extremely valuable.